Happy Tuesday. Welcome to our chapel. Today's Bible verse is from the book of Hosea chapter 6, verse 3. And I'll be reading from the English Standard Version. It says, "Let us know, let us press on to know the Lord. His going out is sure as the dawn. He will come to us as the showers, as the spring rains that waters the earth." So we have been saved by God's grace, right? And we are called to be God's children. So we are called to be God's holy and blameless children. And with this new identity comes a completely new outlook on life and new ways of life. I mean, like how you conduct yourself. And as discussed for the past 2 weeks, we are to put off our old selves, right? And to put on the new self. So putting off of old self is to have our worldviews and our value system and our meaning and purpose of life completely transformed. We no longer follow the patterns of this world. And putting on of a new self is to emulate Jesus, His obedience and His love. Basically, always asking the question, what would Jesus do, right? So before you do anything, before you say anything, you ask yourself, what would Jesus do in this situation? And you actually put into practice, because a lot of people only ask the question but never put that into an action. So now, with this two, right, putting off of old self and putting on of new self as the basic principles of how we are to conduct ourselves as new creation, born again Christians. Now we want to apply this. We want to apply these principles to areas that are important in our lives, right? And we want to apply this basic principles of Christianity in our day-to-day living. So today, the area that I want to tackle is your studies, right? Studies, because you guys are students. Studies is important. And the title of today's message is Holiness in Studies. So how can you be holy? How can you be set apart in your studies? I mean, since most of you are students and studying is basically your job, right? The most important aspect of your life. How can you put off your old self and put on your new self in your studies? I want you to think about this. Because I know that we learn about Christianity. We learn the Christian doctrines and teachings, but we don't usually apply them into our day-to-day living. But I want you to think about this carefully. How do you put off your old self and put on the new self in your studies? So first, let me ask you this question. Why do you study? And I've asked this question to so many students. And in most cases, the answers that I would get is, well, because I want to get good grades. So they want to get good grades. Of course, I'm sure all students want to get good grades in their exams and in their tests and their school subjects. But why do you want to get good grades? So hopefully you'll get into a better school, like when you go off to college. And why go to a good school? Why go to good universities? So you would have a better chance of landing a better paying job, a better job, a job that is more well-known, like prestigious. And of course, if you go to a good universities, you'll get to meet people that will be a good connection in the future. So you do all that. You want to go to good school, so you would hopefully make a lot of money and become successful. So that's basically what most people think the purpose of their studies is. Well, because in the ancient times, doing or studies, when you study, it was for the purpose of searching for the truth. But now schools are the institutions that provide education. So most of the learning takes place in schools. And now schools look more like uh, like a preparatory school, a preparatory system for your job in the future. So the reason why people go to school and choose different majors in universities is so they will get a job in the future. That was not really the purpose of studies in the past, which is quite sad. So they think of learning or school as a place where you can somehow secure a better future. And because that is so important, and because everybody wants a better life, and all the parents want their children to have a better future, they really spend a lot on their children's education, right? They do their best to educate their children well. And I'm sure that most of the parents of our students are very much concerned about their children's education. Well, I'm from Korea. And in Korea, education is a huge deal. People spend ridiculous amount of money on educating their children. And well, you guys are lucky that you go to school, especially high school in the Philippines, because if you were to go to high school in Korea, they call Korean high school students stargazers. Stargazers. Do you know why? Because when they go to school, it's so early that they still can see stars in the sky. When they come home from school, they see stars in the sky. So it's crazy, right? That's how hard they study. All day long, they study like machines. So to get into a better university, so to get a better job. And they believe that your studies, how well you do in your studies, will determine your success and your future. Well, and sadly, in a lot of cases, it's actually true, right? And now, because people are so crazy about educating themselves and educating their children, now this society is becoming polarized. There are those who can afford those educations and those who cannot. And when you can afford those educations, you have a better chance, better opportunities. Because I remember in the past in the Philippines, it wasn't like that, but now they have review centers everywhere too, right? So only those who can afford review centers have better chances of getting into top universities. So now people see education as a pedestal, or as a step towards a better future or a success, or accomplishing great things in life for your own sake or for your own name. Well, but I want you to think about this. Why do you think God allowed studies or learning to begin with? What's the purpose of learning? Well, it says in Genesis 1:28 that God blessed them, Adam and Eve, and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it, rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, and over every living creature that move on the ground." So this is what we call a cultural mandate. God created men, and God put him in charge and said, "Rule over everything that I've created." And to rule over everything, you need wisdom, you need knowledge. And in Genesis chapter 2:15, it says, "The Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to take care of it." So for human beings to work the ground and to take care of God's creation. Well, because for the original man, there's no problem with knowing God, because they were already in a very intimate and close relationship with God. So they received this great wisdom and power from God, so they could rule over all the creation, and they could work it and take care of it. So as God's representatives here on this earth, they can lead all creation to fulfill their life's purpose and glorify God. So that was the purpose of learning and studies. We learn, we study, so we could fulfill our purpose, which is to glorify God, and to also do the task that God has given us, which is to rule over and to take care of everything and to lead all creation to fulfill their life purpose of glorifying God. So that was our duty. But this blessing was lost after the fall of man. And now that their relationship with God is broken because of sin, they could not know God anymore. They lost the knowledge of God, knowledge of their Maker. You have no idea how important this is. If you don't know your Maker, you don't know why you're made, then you're lost, right? But now they lost the knowledge of their Maker, and their life is doomed to destruction. It says in Hosea chapter 4, verse 6, this is God saying, my people are destroyed from lack of knowledge, because you have rejected knowledge. I also reject you as my priests, because you have ignored the laws of your God. I'll also ignore your children. This is what God said. My people are destroyed from lack of knowledge. There's knowledge that people lack. There's something that people should know that they don't know. And people have become so sinful that according to Romans chapter 1, verses 21 and 22, it says, for although they knew God, so if you're honest to yourself and look at the world that we live in and look at yourself, you know that there is a creator, that you are made by someone who is infinitely intelligent and powerful. So you know God, it says, for although they knew God, they neither glorified him as God nor gave thanks to him. But their thinking became futile and their foolish hearts were darkened. Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools. So this is what man has become. When they lost the knowledge of God, this is what they become. So now they have no knowledge of God. And they do not strive to know God. Then they consume their knowledge only for their own glory, for their own desires, for their own pride, for their own reputation. And they think this is only natural. This is just the way it's meant to be. No, this is a result of sin. And everybody studies for this reason, right? So through your studies, you can get to a place where you want to be and gratify your desires, right? You can buy things you want to buy. You can have things that you want to have. And you can be in a place or in a status where you can be proud of yourself and where others will feel jealous of you. Well, but if you think about it carefully and then look at all the problems of this world, usually it is those who are well educated, well learned, who cause great troubles and problems in this world, all because of their greed, all because of their greed. The people who are not as well educated, people who are not as well learned, people who are not that influential, the harm that they can do is only limited. But the people who are smart, people who are wise, people who have reached high with their talents and with their knowledge are the ones who are causing bigger troubles and problems in this world. I know that now this new technology, although it's very convenient, is causing a lot of troubles, especially addictions among the teens, right? And here's something very interesting, because I read this one interview about this one game company in Korea. So the CEO of the company who founded that company, so he invented this amazing game, right? And basically almost all young Koreans play that game, and a lot of Chinese people, a lot of Southeast Asians, a lot of people all around the world play this game. But he would not let his own child play his game, the game that he made. So why would he make a game that he would not let his own child play to begin with? See, they don't care. All that matters is their power, their money. Even Steve Jobs, he would not let his own children, play with his own gadgets, the gadgets that he invented. So all the injustice and corruption, even wars, happen because of people that are very well learned and educated. Which is ironic, right? But now, for those who are born again, we study for a different reason, different purpose. Well, in fact, even all the studies of the secular world, right? If you study them deeply, you will find God. You will find God's amazing works behind the scene. You will see amazing wisdom and power of God interwoven in everything that is created. That's why a lot of renowned philosophers, scientists like physicists or biologists, mathematicians, they found God. I mean, they discovered God through their deep studies. They looked at this amazing world that God has created. And they were so amazed by God's outstanding wisdom. And they were so humbled by God's majesty that they glorified God and served Him. See, the reason why God has given us intellect and intelligence is so we would use it to know God more. So we would glorify God with all our wisdom and all our knowledge. It says in Proverbs chapter 9 verse 10, fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. See? The very beginning of knowledge is fear of the Lord. Without the knowledge of God, your knowledge is very limited. It is insufficient. See, you need the knowledge of the Holy One for a true understanding of the world that we live in. And everything, in all the areas of studies, if you study them deeply, with honest heart, you will see a Creator there. And that's why it says in Colossians chapter 2 verse 3 that in Christ are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. And this great mathematician once said that all mathematics will lead to philosophy, and philosophy will eventually lead you to theology. See, that's what happens if you really study deeply one area with honest heart, with humble heart. But sadly, even many Christians now, they don't really strive to know God through their studies, through anything really. All they care about is just getting better grades or acquiring knowledge that will help them put bread on their table. I mean, I'm not saying that's not important, but they're not really interested in knowing God more, growing in the knowledge of God. And I want you to think about this. If a creator God really exists, and He's all-powerful, almighty, He does not need anything from us, then what do you think He would want from us? Think about it. I think He would want us to know Him, right? Know our Maker, and honor Him and glorify Him. So you can learn about God through all different areas of study. But when it comes to God's special plans, especially His plan of salvation, you can only learn it from the Scriptures. That's why I emphasize that we should learn the Scriptures, that we should read the Bible and meditate on it, because it reveals God's plan and God's will. But again, sadly, even many Christians are very lazy when it comes to knowing more about God and learning more about God. But I pray that you guys, as you keep learning from this institution, and as you continue to learn throughout your life, I pray that your knowledge will lead you to the knowledge of God. A better knowledge of God, that you will be humbled by God's great and amazing work and glorify Him and honor Him. And God's children have different uses, right? They have different use. They use their knowledge differently. The knowledge that they acquired from their studies, they use it differently. I mean, if you think about it, Jesus too grew in His knowledge. It says in Luke chapter 2 verses 52 that, "And Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and men." So Jesus grew in wisdom too. So we know that he grew in wisdom, and he also, remember when he was 12 and he went to a temple and he was with Pharisees and teachers of the law, and he amazed them with his knowledge, right? And even during his public ministries, a lot of people who heard from Jesus were amazed by his wisdom because that he grew in knowledge. He also studied. But all the knowledge that he acquired from his studies, he did not use it to only serve himself. In fact, he never used any of his knowledge, any of his wisdom for his own gain. He used it solely to serve others and to love others. See, that's how Jesus used his knowledge and wisdom. Everything that he had learned, he used that to serve others and to love others. And same applies to Apostle Paul, because he was educated with the best knowledge of his time. He was born in the city of Tarsus, which is one of 3 major cities of philosophy in ancient Greece. So he was very well versed in Greek philosophy. He completely mastered the Jewish religion. He was a very, very smart man. He was very, very well educated man. He studied under Gamaliel, the greatest teacher of his time. And he was one of his best students. So you can see him as like the summa cum laude of Harvard University. That was who Paul was. Very, very well versed in religion and philosophy and knowledge. But after meeting Jesus Christ, and of course, like, he used all that knowledge for his own gains, for his own self-righteousness. But after meeting Jesus Christ, what happened? He considered that as rubbish. And when I say that he considered it as rubbish, I'm not saying that those knowledge was useless. No. He actually used that knowledge well. But compared to a surpassing greatness of the gospel, those knowledge was nothing for him, because the gospel was so precious. And that's why he even said in 1 Corinthians chapter 2 verse 7, "For I resolved to know nothing while I was with you except Jesus Christ and him crucified." With all this knowledge that he had, he said, "I resolved to know nothing but Jesus Christ." That was his confession. And with all his knowledge, he served people, he taught people, he loved them, he sacrificed himself to build up others. He used his knowledge that way because he learned that from Jesus. So why do we study? Why do we acquire knowledge? Not for our own gains, but to love and to serve others. You know, there's a Korean saying which goes, in Korean is 배워서 남 주냐, which roughly translates as, do you learn and give to others? Right? So basically the moral of this saying is that, you know, you have to be diligent in your learning, because everything that you learn, you'll keep it to yourself. It's for your own gain. So they would ask, you know, if you see a kid or child, you know, who's not studying hard, you would say 배워서 남 주냐, right? Do you learn and give to others? No, it's all for your own good. So study hard, right? So this is a Korean saying. But I went to a Christian university in Korea, and the school has a motto, and it says 배워서 남 줘라, which means learn to give to others. So everything that you learn is not for you. It is for others. You have to use that knowledge to serve and to love others. So all your learnings, all your talents, everything that God has given you, it's not for your own sake. See, God's commandment for you is to love God and to love your neighbors. With everything that you have learned, with all your knowledge, you should love God and love your neighbors. And that's where your knowledge, that's where your studies should be used. Because we want to keep God's commandments. So none of that is for self-serving purposes, but you want to serve and love others. And if that is the purpose of learning, then you have to do your best in your learning, in your studies. Because there are people out there who need your knowledge, who need your service, who need a servant leadership of Christians who will serve them and love them and lead them to the knowledge of God. And it's my prayer that all of you will find a new purpose in your studies. You're not studying simply because you want a better life. You want your life to be better than everyone else's. With that kind of life, you'll never be satisfied. You'll never be happy, because there will always be someone who's better than you. Actually, a lot of people out there who's so much better than you. And people who start off at a place that is so much far advanced than you that you can never catch up. See, if you try to find happiness there, and if your purpose of study becomes just simply catching up to them and climbing up the social ladder and becoming, a successful person, then I can guarantee you that life will be very empty and meaningless. But now we are born again. We have a new identity. And everything that we do serves different purpose now. And it's my prayer that you would study hard. And in your studies, as you continue to study, try to seek God in every areas of your studies. And also, all the knowledge that you gain from this institution and from your own studies, I pray that you will use that to love and to serve others like Jesus did. So let's close in prayer. Dear Father, we thank you for giving us this time for us to come before you, to learn more about your word, and also learn more about how we can be holy in our studies. Lord, I ask that you would bless our students and you would give them your wisdom, that they would know you more, that they will be able to find you and discover you in all the areas of their studies. And may they do their best in their studies, so they would really obey to your command where God put them in their fields, which is being students, that they would do their best in obedience to your sovereign plan. And with all the knowledge that they acquire, that they would be able to serve and to love others like Jesus did. We thank and you pray in Jesus Christ's name. Amen.